I've jumped here to the accession JSON schema. So this is the file that defines the basic properties that must be contained for an accession record to be valid. And I want to talk here about a concept we call nested records. So a nested record is a record that is a child of another record. Some nested records can be top-level records themselves, but mostly nested records can only exist as the child of a top-level record. So I'm in the accession schema here, and I just want to highlight a couple of the nested records that accession support. So you can see we have a couple of properties here. Starting from line 75, we have extents, dates, external documents, write statements, deaccession, collection management, and user defined. Each of these represents a nested record of an accession. So what this means is we can go to the extent object, for example, and you can see, just like accessions, extents have their own schema, so we have properties that must be there for an extent to be valid. And so what this definition in accession means is when you see the property extents, we're expecting it to be an array of extent objects. And extent objects here will be JSON objects, but they must satisfy the extent schema. So validation against the JSON schema is actually recursive. So we go through each property and make sure that it satisfies the definition as defined by the schema. And in the case where we find a JSON model extent object, for example, we then validate the contents of that record against the nested schema. So nested records end up causing validation to happen at multiple levels. We saw before that the AS model mixin provides the methods for mapping to and from the database. And because nested records are such a fundamental concept to the system, AS model also provides methods for handling them. So I'm going to jump to the AS model mixin again now, if I can find it. Let's see how I do here. I'm back in the CRUD one, and we'll see here if I find create from JSON again. I glossed over this before, but you can see that as a part of creating the object in the database, as soon as we've done that, we then say object.apply nested records, and we pass it the JSON. So apply nested records here is going to handle the sort of declarations we just saw in the schema, so things like extents and dates and those sort of nested records. So what will happen is the apply nested records is going to look at that incoming JSON data, look at the schema, and find any subrecords that need to be pulled out, validated, and also created in the database. So what this means is when you're creating the database record for a single accession, that might actually trigger a number of other subrecords to be created, and those are standalone models and get linked to the parent record at the point they're created. So create from JSON and update from JSON will both use apply nested records to handle automatically creating the nested records as required. And if I just jump down now to SQL to JSON model, which is the inverse, you'll just see here that at the point we're pulling the record out of the database and turning it back into a JSON model, we also iterate over the nested record definitions and pull those records out and turn them into JSON models too. So this is the inverse of that process.